presentations from 3 graduate students. Our first graduate student speaker is Justin Britton. He's a graduate student at Utah State University, where he's pursuing his master's degree in ecology. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and his research is focused on aspen regeneration ecology and management in southern Utah. So please welcome Justin.
Can you hear me? Is this thing, got it? Good, okay. Well, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here today and stand up here among some people I really look up to. But I'm going to talk about some ongoing work evaluating treatment success in aspen and how this work may potentially lead to some great management application. So just an overview, I'll give a brief introduction to the species, followed by kind of what we're looking at and how we're doing it, and give some speculative outcomes at this point, and then kind of wrap things up. So aspen has an enduring research history. It's become the most widely studied sprouting species. There's research that dates back all the way to the early 1900s. Aspen is early successional, therefore management has relied on this inherent ability primarily through coppice forestry, and there's been some very interesting recent novel insights, some that we've heard about, some you will hear about later today, pertaining to sexual reproduction, among other things. And so a lot of these novel insights, I feel, come from these trending perspectives, particularly pessimism among the future of aspen. So we can see the first 2 excerpts here out of Forest Ecology and Management. They're modestly pessimistic with a modest impact factor of about 2.8, but it seems as though impact factor and pessimism might be positively related, because this one here, we're going to see aspen disappearing, and there isn't anything we can do about it. So what I'm really trying to get at is what can we do about it? And so to get at that, I want to answer this question. So what effects do stand vigor management actions and climatic variability have on the successful regeneration of aspen, specifically on Cedar Mountain and the Markagump Plateau? And so I have to define successful regeneration in our context, that being stems at or above the 2-meter height level that have surpassed the detriments of herbivory and other things associated with juvenility. And so we have this ecologically based question, but what we're really getting at is an applied document or a tool that we can hand to these landowners or land managers, such as some of you guys. And so here you can see Cedar Mountain down here in orange, and then this whole area is kind of the Markagump Plateau. And just to kind of get your space, is Cedar City, this is where we're working at, and this is where we all are here today in Logan. And so we have these 3 postulated drivers of regeneration being stand vigor in the appropriate proxies of stand vigor. So that might be sapwood cross-sectional area as a proxy for leaf area. And we're also interested in disturbance history. So that could be silvicultural treatment, prescribed fire, grazing regimes for domestic wildlife or domestic ungulates. And lastly, how does intra and interannual climatic variation drive regeneration response? And so what we did, we went out and we got at these drivers by doing a lot of sampling. And so here's a good example of one of my sites to kind of get at what we were looking at. So we comparing pre-treatment and post-treatment effects. And so here it would be the pre-treatment representation. This is retrospective, so we visited managed sites, and we would measure things in the pre-treatment stand, hop over here in the treatment area, and kind of measure the response, which in this case being successful regeneration. And so just to kind of a little bit about this photo, it's this treatment is a few years old. There's not a lot going on, but we did sample stands all the way from like 15 years old until just a year out on the treatment. So, but what we're primarily interested in are these multivariate interactions. And so to kind of walk through our thinking here, say you have a marginal stand and you manage that stand in some way, followed by a few years of high snowpack, you might get successful regeneration. On the contrary, say you have a vigorous stand there, you manage that stand, follow it by a few years of drought, and you may be looking at something like this, very limited regeneration. And to throw in a caveat, you may have this, everything's the same here, and then you introduce a lot of ungulates on the site, whether it be domestic or native, and you may still be faced with some limited regeneration. And so that's kind of conceptually what we're interested in. And now I'm going to show you some very preliminary data that I just got out of the field this summer. And so what this plot is showing is pre-treatment regeneration on the horizontal axis, that being stands that are regenerating in the absence of disturbance. And so when we see an interesting relationship emerge, this line here represents what the literature tells us is adequate stem numbers per hectare to adequately restock the stand. And so we see, this interesting phenomenon of a lot of the stands that have low pre-treatment stem numbers are failures, essentially. And so, this metric in itself is not complete, but when, paired with something else, there's potential great utility. And so anecdotally, we can see this. This here is a stand that is regenerating in the absence of disturbance, and that's what you get. And on, just the opposite here, there's not a lot going on in the understory, and you manage that stand in some way, and you're left with a field. And so the literature also tells us that if you want to get aspen back, you exclude ungulates. And so we were interested in how much of an effect ungulates were having on the regeneration in our sites. And so this is a figure showing successful regeneration again on the y-axis, and then this herbivory index on the horizontal axis. This herbivory index is something we developed, or just, it's just an index from 0 to 1 that is simply stems that were browsed divided by stems that were not, or total stems. And so browse stems divided by total stems. And so if we fit a line to this data, it would probably look something like that. Again, we put that 10,000 stems per hectare threshold, and then we see this other interesting threshold emerge at about 0.3, that if this herbivory index is greater than 0.3, we don't have any stands that would be deemed successful in terms of their regeneration. And so, yeah, that, what's driving this? And we're not only interested in success, but, why are these stands failing aside from the herbivory? So, and lastly, we're interested in climate, how this climatic variation affects regeneration, but we were not able to get to that data. It's currently furloughed. But if we did have the data, it might look something like this. So on a dry site, you have very limited regeneration. As you increase the moisture, you increase regeneration success, until eventually the site can no longer support more biomass. Therefore, more moisture does not give you more successful regeneration. And our best attempt at getting at interactions is this pretty simple diagram. But we threw a handful of variables in a classification tree, and lo and behold, these are the ones that came out as important. And so to walk you through this quickly, again, we have this herbivory index, total stems browsed divided by all the stems on the plot. And if it's greater than 0.2, we're seeing, this doesn't really matter. We're looking at not a lot of regeneration. But if the index is less than about 0.2 and your pre-treatment regeneration is greater than about 4,000, these stands are very successful. And so, we're hopeful that this data is going to show some interesting relationships, and it is likely that all three of these postulated drivers likely influence regeneration. And to really, get at the scope of this project, what we're interested in is something like this. I know this slide is busy, but this is an example of a decision matrix that we might be able to hand to a landowner or a land manager. And to walk you through it, you would classify your stand based on these descriptors and rank your stand, add up your ranks, and then come down here and you can say, well, you know, what is my regeneration potential? Should I harvest? Should I manage? Or should I not? And so to just close things up, I think aspen has a bright future. And so I thought this Mark Twain quote kind of, you know, shed some light on that. But anyways, yeah, so these are the people I have just to give great thanks to, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
We have time.
Yeah, in the back.
In regards to your browse index, is that something that was based upon one-year data or multi-year data? If it's multi-year data, how might it have varied over time, and did you make any attempt to classify whether those were due to domestic or wild ungulates?
And so to answer that, we kind of wrestled with the idea of how we were going to quantify herbivory. And since this is totally retrospective, we couldn't go back in time clearly. And so we had to work with what we had, and that was the evidence that was in front of us, you know, present day. And so I can't shed any light on whether or not it was domestic or whether or not it was native. I can speculate, but I don't really feel comfortable doing that. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
So it was cumulative at the point of time of
Yeah, it was just the day we were there, like how many stems were browsed, had terminal browsing specifically, and how many stems did not. And so, yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, Simon.
Have you actually measured the leaf area index of your control sites, the unmanaged or the not cut ones, and then looked at how leaf area developed in your recommendation? I'm still thinking more restoration stuff. So in your harvested sites. The reason why I'm asking the question is the balance of leaf area to root system.
Oh.
If you don't get the sucker density, you lose root system because it's not being maintained. So my question is some of the things you see down the road will be a problem in your regeneration if you don't have a root system and it's not maintained by the leaf area. Will it affect the future productivity of your sites? You might have the suckers, but they will never produce lots. They will never have good growth rates.
Well, I think you kind of answered that yourself, but we don't have the allometric equation built. So the sapwood cross-sectional area for leaf area, that allometric doesn't exist. So we measured sapwood cross-sectional area. We're going to hopefully build that allometric within the next year's time. Yeah. Thanks for calling me out on that. Yeah, Jim.
When you've got sapwood cross-section area, the pre-treatment stands,
Yes.
does that relate preliminary? I mean, does that
Yeah, there is a positive relationship, but it's not extremely. I mean, sapwood cross-sectional area doesn't capture a ton of variation on the response variable. But it's turned out to be useful, especially when thrown in with other things. So, how are we doing on time? One more. Anyone else? All right. Yeah, Paul.
Maybe I missed something. I was a little confused in your decision tree and back to the index that Stan asked about between the 0.2 and the 0.3. I think I missed something basic there, but that seems like a critical cutoff that's in the literature, that range, and I think you mean by 20 or 30% browse. Is that's what you mean?
Yeah. And so, I kind of showed those data slides in chronological order in terms of how I evaluated those slides. And so, I was just recently introduced to the beauty of a classification tree. And aside from that, I was looking at those bivariate interactions. And so we were like, well, that's about 0.3. And then it turns out it's right at 0.2. And so I didn't, yeah. But yeah, you're right. Thanks.
I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong. I was just asking for clarification.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, so they're essentially, it's just I just messed up on the first one. So,
Let's thank Jeff.
yeah, thank you guys.